The autumn morning air carried a crisp bite as King Charles III stepped out of his private quarters at Windsor Castle. The year 2023 had been one of significant transitions for the monarch, who had waited decades to assume the throne his mother had occupied with such grace and dignity. Now, 8 months into his reign, Charles was still adjusting to the weight of the crown, both literally and figuratively. As he walked through the stone corridors that had witnessed centuries of royal history, Charles reflected on the morning's schedule. Today would mark his first official inspection of the Coldstream Guards at their ceremonial post. It was a tradition that stretched back generations, a formal review that demonstrated the monarch's connection to the armed forces and the continuity of royal protocol. The king had always held deep respect for the military. During his years as Prince of Wales, he had served in the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force, understanding firsthand the dedication and sacrifice required of those who served the crown. This inspection was more than mere ceremony. It was a personal moment of connection with the men and women who had sworn to protect the realm. Charles adjusted his military dress uniform, the medals catching the morning light streaming through the tall windows. Each ribbon and decoration told a story of service, duty, and honor. The uniform felt heavier now, imbued with the authority of kingship rather than the responsibilities of an heir apparent. Every detail had been meticulously planned by the royal household staff, from the timing of his departure to the exact route he would take through the castle grounds. The Coldstream Guards had been preparing for this inspection for weeks. These elite soldiers, with their distinctive red tunics and bearskin hats, represented the pinnacle of military precision and royal tradition. Their lineage could be traced back to 1650, making them one of the oldest regiments in the British Army. For them, this inspection was not just another duty. It was an opportunity to demonstrate their unwavering loyalty to their new sovereign. Captain James Morrison, the commanding officer leading today's inspection detail, had spent the previous evening reviewing every aspect of the ceremony with his men. Morrison was a career soldier, having dedicated 20 years of his life to the Guards. His father had served before him, and his grandfather before that, creating a family legacy of service that spanned 3 generations. The responsibility of presenting his men to the king weighed heavily on his shoulders. The protocol for royal inspections had been refined over centuries, each element designed to showcase military discipline while honoring the monarchy. The guards would stand at attention as the king approached, their rifles held in perfect alignment, their bearing exemplifying the highest standards of military deportment. When the sovereign drew near, they would present arms, a gesture of respect and recognition of royal authority. But protocol, no matter how well rehearsed, could never account for the human element. As King Charles made his way toward the inspection area, he carried with him not just the expectations of tradition, but also his own personal hopes for this moment. He wanted to connect with these soldiers, to see beyond their ceremonial roles to the individuals who had chosen to dedicate their lives to service. The courtyard where the inspection would take place had been transformed into a perfect stage for royal ceremony. The ancient stones had been swept clean, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the formation area. Spectators, including members of the royal household and visiting dignitaries, had gathered at a respectful distance to witness this time-honored tradition. As the appointed hour approached, the guards took their positions with mechanical precision. Each soldier had spent countless hours perfecting his stance, his uniform immaculate down to the last button and buckle. Their bearskin hats, towering and imposing, added to their formidable presence. These were not just soldiers, they were guardians of tradition, living symbols of British military heritage. Captain Morrison watched the clock, his own nervous energy carefully concealed beneath years of military training. He had participated in dozens of ceremonial events, but this was different. This was his first time presenting his men to King Charles III, and the weight of that responsibility was not lost on him. Everything had to be perfect. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed across the courtyard, announcing the arrival of the royal party. King Charles appeared, flanked by his equerry and private secretary, his bearing regal yet approachable. The autumn sun highlighted the gold braiding on his uniform, and his expression carried the serious dignity appropriate for such a formal occasion. As the king drew nearer, Captain Morrison felt his heart rate increase slightly. This was the moment they had all prepared for, the culmination of weeks of rehearsal and anticipation. The guards stood motionless, their discipline evident in every line of their formation. The spectators fell silent, understanding they were witnessing a ceremony that connected the present moment to centuries of royal tradition. King Charles paused at the beginning of the inspection route, taking a moment to survey the assembled guards. His trained eye noted the perfection of their turnout, the pride evident in their bearing. These men represented the very best of British military tradition, and he felt honored to be their sovereign. The weight of their loyalty, freely given and earned through generations of royal service, was not something he took lightly. The morning air seemed to hold its breath as the formal inspection began. Every step was measured, every gesture calculated to maintain the dignity of the moment. The king moved with the confidence of a man who had spent his entire life preparing for such responsibilities. Yet there was something different about this particular ceremony, an undercurrent of anticipation that no one could quite identify. Captain Morrison stepped forward to formally present the guard, his voice carrying clearly across the silent courtyard. The words he spoke were ancient, passed down through generations of soldiers who had stood in similar formations before countless monarchs. Yet today, those words felt particularly meaningful, charged with the significance of a new reign and fresh beginnings. As King Charles acknowledged the formal presentation, he prepared to begin his inspection of the ranks. This was the moment when tradition would meet reality, when the carefully planned ceremony would unfold exactly as it had countless times before. Or so everyone believed. The first few soldiers stood perfectly as the king approached, their eyes fixed straight ahead, their rifles held in precise alignment. Charles paused briefly before each man, noting their bearing and offering a small nod of acknowledgement. The inspection was proceeding exactly according to protocol, each element falling into place like pieces of a well-orchestrated symphony. But, as the king continued down the line, approaching the center of the formation, something unexpected began to unfold. The guards, who had maintained their rigid discipline throughout the early part of the inspection, seemed to shift slightly. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable to the casual observer, but Captain Morrison caught it immediately. The change was not in their physical stance, which remained impeccable, but in something more intangible. There was an energy building within the ranks, a collective anticipation that had not been part of any rehearsal. Morrison felt a flutter of concern, uncertain what was developing but sensing that the carefully scripted ceremony was about to take an unexpected turn. King Charles, focused on the individual soldiers before him, had not yet noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. He continued his measured pace, offering each guard the respect and attention their service deserved. The morning sun climbed higher, casting the entire scene in brilliant light, as if nature itself was providing stage lighting for whatever was about to unfold. The spectators, too, seemed to sense something building, though none could have predicted what was coming. The silence of the courtyard felt charged with possibility, as if the very stones of Windsor Castle were holding their breath in anticipation. As King Charles approached the midpoint of his inspection, the moment that would define this ceremony was drawing near. The guards, these exemplars of military discipline and royal tradition, were about to respond to their sovereign in a way that no protocol manual had ever described, no rehearsal had ever practiced, and no one present would ever forget. As King Charles reached the center of the guard formation, he paused before Lance Corporal William Thompson, a young soldier whose military record was exemplary, but whose story was far more complex than his pristine uniform suggested. Thompson had joined the Coldstream Guards 3 years earlier, following a difficult period in his life when direction and purpose had seemed impossible to find. Growing up in a small industrial town in northern England, Thompson had watched his community struggle with economic decline and social challenges. His father, a former steelworker, had been unemployed for years, and the family had faced genuine hardship. The military had offered Thompson not just a career, but a chance to serve something greater than himself, to find meaning and structure in a world that often seemed chaotic and uncertain. Standing at attention as his sovereign approached, Thompson felt the weight of this moment in ways that protocol could never capture. This was not just a formal inspection. It was a personal encounter with the man who represented everything Thompson had sworn to protect and serve. The young soldier's mind raced with thoughts of his family, his hometown, and the journey that had brought him to this extraordinary moment. King Charles stopped directly in front of Thompson, and, for a brief instant, their eyes met. In that split second of connection, the king saw something that moved him deeply. There was pride in the young soldier's gaze, certainly, but also vulnerability, hope, and an unmistakable sincerity that spoke to the very heart of what service meant. The king had always prided himself on his ability to connect with people from all walks of life, but this moment felt particularly significant. Here was a young man who had chosen to dedicate his life to serving the crown, not for glory or recognition, but from a genuine desire to be part of something meaningful and lasting. Thompson, meanwhile, was struggling to maintain his composure. Meeting the king's gaze, even briefly, had stirred emotions he had not expected to feel. This man before him represented not just the monarchy, but the very best of British values and traditions. The weight of that realization, combined with the intensity of the moment, created a powerful emotional current that the young soldier fought to contain. As King Charles prepared to move on to the next soldier in line, something remarkable happened. Without breaking his perfect military bearing, without moving a single muscle that would violate protocol, Thompson began to smile. It was not a broad grin or an inappropriate expression, but rather a gentle, heartfelt smile that conveyed respect, admiration, and genuine joy at this moment of connection. The king noticed the smile immediately, and something inside him responded in kind. Here was authentic human warmth breaking through the formal barriers of royal protocol, a genuine moment of connection that no amount of ceremonial planning could have created or predicted. Captain Morrison, watching from his position at the head of the formation, noticed the subtle change in both his soldier and his sovereign. Years of military experience had taught him to read situations quickly, and he could sense that something significant was occurring, though he was not yet certain what form it would take. King Charles made a decision in that instant that would transform this routine inspection into something extraordinary. Instead of maintaining the formal distance that protocol demanded, he chose to acknowledge the humanity he saw before him. The king, still moving with the measured pace appropriate to the ceremony, allowed his own expression to soften slightly, returning Thompson's smile with a barely perceptible nod of genuine appreciation. This small exchange, lasting no more than a few seconds, sent ripples throughout the formation. The soldiers, trained to maintain absolute discipline while remaining acutely aware of their surroundings, sensed the shift in atmosphere. Something authentic and meaningful was happening before their eyes, something that transcended the rigid boundaries of formal ceremony. The effect was subtle but unmistakable. As King Charles continued his inspection, moving to the next soldier in line, the guards began to respond not just as military automatons following protocol, but as human beings recognizing a moment of genuine connection with their sovereign. Guardsman Michael Davies, standing next to Thompson, felt the change immediately. Davies was a veteran of multiple overseas deployments, a soldier who had seen combat and understood the serious nature of military service. Yet as the king approached him, Davies found himself reflecting not on protocol and procedure, but on the meaning of the oath he had sworn and the man who stood before him as the embodiment of that commitment. King Charles paused before Davies, and, once again, the formal inspection took on a more personal dimension. The king could see in this soldier's bearing the confidence that came from tested experience, the quiet competence of a professional who had proven himself under difficult circumstances. Davies, for his part, saw in his sovereign not just a figurehead, but a leader who genuinely cared about the welfare and service of his soldiers. The exchange between them was wordless but profound. A slight inclination of the king's head, a barely perceptible acknowledgement from Davies, and the bond between sovereign and soldier was reinforced in a way that no amount of formal ceremony could achieve. As this pattern continued down the line, the entire character of the inspection began to evolve. What had started as a traditional royal ceremony was becoming something far more meaningful, a genuine encounter between a new monarch and the soldiers who had pledged their lives to serve him. The spectators, initially focused on the pageantry and tradition of the event, gradually became aware that they were witnessing something unique. The formal precision of the ceremony remained intact, but it was now infused with an emotional depth that elevated it beyond mere protocol. Lady Catherine Pemberton, a member of the royal household who had attended dozens of such ceremonies over her long career, found herself moved in ways she had not experienced before. She recognized that King Charles was bringing his own distinctive approach to this ancient ritual, allowing space for genuine human connection within the framework of royal tradition. The foreign dignitaries present, including the ambassador from France and a delegation from the Commonwealth, watched with growing interest as the inspection continued to unfold. They had expected to witness a formal display of British military precision, but they were experiencing something far more profound, a demonstration of the personal bond between monarch and military that lay at the heart of the British constitutional system. As King Charles moved through the center section of the guard formation, each interaction built upon the last. The soldiers, while maintaining their perfect military bearing, began to radiate a sense of pride and connection that went beyond mere duty. They were experiencing firsthand the respect and appreciation of their new sovereign, and that recognition was transforming their understanding of their own service. Sergeant Major Robert Harrison, a 25-year veteran who had served under 3 different monarchs, watched the proceedings with amazement. He had participated in countless royal ceremonies, but he had never seen anything quite like what was developing before his eyes. The king was managing to honor every aspect of military protocol while simultaneously creating space for genuine human connection. The morning sun continued to climb, bathing the entire courtyard in brilliant light that seemed to highlight the significance of each moment. The ancient stones of Windsor Castle bore witness to this evolution of royal tradition, as a new king found his own way to honor both the formality of his role and the humanity of those who served under him. Captain Morrison, initially concerned about any deviation from established protocol, began to recognize the profound wisdom in what King Charles was doing. The king was not abandoning tradition. He was enriching it, adding layers of meaning and connection that would make this ceremony memorable for everyone present. As the inspection approached its climax, the transformation of the event from routine ceremony to meaningful encounter became complete. The guards, while never breaking their military discipline, had become active participants in creating something special rather than merely passive recipients of royal attention. The stage was now set for the moment that would define this entire ceremony, the response that would leave King Charles stunned and create a memory that would resonate far beyond this single autumn morning at Windsor Castle. As King Charles approached the final section of the guard formation, the atmosphere in the courtyard had become electric with anticipation. The transformation of the ceremony from rigid protocol to genuine human connection had created something unprecedented, and everyone present could sense that this moment was building towards something extraordinary. At the end of the line stood Company Sergeant Major David Mitchell, a soldier whose reputation for excellence was legendary within the regiment. Mitchell had served for 28 years, rising through the ranks through a combination of natural leadership ability, unwavering dedication, and an innate understanding of what it meant to serve the crown. His chest bore the ribbons of multiple campaigns, and his bearing reflected the accumulated wisdom of nearly 3 decades in uniform. Mitchell had watched the king's progress down the line with growing awareness that this inspection had evolved into something far beyond the ordinary. The subtle exchanges between sovereign and soldiers, the gradual building of genuine connection, had created an atmosphere that called for something special. As the senior non-commissioned officer present, Mitchell felt the weight of responsibility to respond appropriately to this unique moment. King Charles paused before Mitchell, and the 2 men regarded each other with mutual respect. The king saw before him the embodiment of military professionalism and dedication, a career soldier who represented the very best traditions of British military service. Mitchell, for his part, recognized in his sovereign a leader who genuinely valued the service and sacrifice of those under his command. The moment stretched between them, charged with significance. Then, something remarkable happened. Mitchell, without breaking his perfect military bearing, began to speak. His voice was clear and strong, carrying easily across the silent courtyard. "Your Majesty," Mitchell said, his words measured and deliberate. On behalf of every member of the Coldstream Guards, I want you to know that we serve not just the crown, but the man who wears it. We have watched your journey to the throne, witnessed your dedication to duty and service, and we are proud to call you our king. The words hung in the morning air, breaking the traditional silence of royal inspections in a way that was both shocking and profoundly moving. Protocol had been not just bent, but fundamentally reimagined, transformed by the genuine emotion of the moment. King Charles was visibly affected by Mitchell's unexpected address. This was not part of any script, not covered by any protocol manual, yet it was exactly what this moment demanded. The king's expression reflected surprise, certainly, but also deep appreciation for the courage and sincerity of the gesture. But Mitchell was not finished. Drawing upon his decades of experience and his deep understanding of his fellow soldiers, he made a decision that would make this ceremony truly unforgettable. Raising his voice so that it carried to every corner of the courtyard, he called out a command that no one present had ever heard in a royal inspection. "Guards!" Mitchell shouted, his voice resonating with authority and emotion. "For our king." Hip hip. The response was immediate and thunderous. Every member of the Coldstream Guards, maintaining their perfect military bearing but allowing their voices to carry their genuine feelings, responded in unison, "Hooray!" The sound echoed off the ancient walls of Windsor Castle like a cannon shot, reverberating through the courtyard with startling power. But Mitchell was not done. "Hip hip," he called again, his voice even stronger now. "Hooray!" came the response, even more powerful than before. "Hip hip." Mitchell called for the third and final time. "Hooray!" The final response seemed to shake the very foundations of the castle, a sound of pure joy and loyalty that transcended all boundaries of protocol and tradition. King Charles stood frozen in amazement, his composure momentarily shattered by the sheer power and authenticity of the moment. This was not the formal salute he had anticipated. This was something far more meaningful. This was the spontaneous expression of genuine loyalty and affection from soldiers who had chosen to serve not just the institution of monarchy, but him personally as their king. The silence that followed the three cheers was profound and moving. The guards maintained their perfect military bearing, but their faces reflected the satisfaction of having expressed their true feelings for their sovereign. They had broken with tradition in the most respectful way possible, creating a moment of authentic connection that would live in their memories forever. Captain Morrison, initially shocked by the departure from protocol, quickly recognized the profound appropriateness of what had occurred. His soldiers had not abandoned discipline or disrespected tradition. They had enhanced both by adding a layer of genuine human emotion that elevated the entire ceremony. The spectators were equally moved by what they had witnessed. Lady Catherine Pemberton found herself fighting back tears, recognizing that she had just experienced something truly special. The foreign dignitaries exchanged glances of amazement, understanding that they had witnessed something uniquely British, the ability to honor tradition while allowing space for authentic human expression. King Charles, recovering his composure but clearly still deeply affected, took a step forward toward the guards. The protocol called for him to complete the inspection and return to his starting position, but this was no longer a moment for protocol. This was a moment for leadership, for connection, for acknowledging what these soldiers had just given him. "Gentlemen," the king began, his voice carrying clearly across the courtyard but reflecting the emotion of the moment. "In all my years of preparation for this role, in all the ceremonies and traditions I have witnessed and participated in, I have never experienced anything quite like what you have just shown me." He paused, looking along the line of soldiers who had given him this extraordinary gift of genuine expression. "Your service to the crown is exemplary, but your loyalty to me personally is something I will treasure always. Thank you for this moment, and thank you for your service." The king's words were met with another silence, but this was different from the formal quiet of traditional ceremony. This was the comfortable silence of understanding, of connection established, and mutual respect acknowledged. Sergeant Major Harrison, watching from his position, realized that he was witnessing the birth of a new relationship between this king and his military. The spontaneous demonstration of loyalty would set the tone for King Charles's entire relationship with the armed forces, establishing a foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection that would serve both monarch and military well in the years to come. As the formal inspection concluded, the atmosphere remained charged with the significance of what had occurred. The traditional elements of the ceremony had all been preserved and honored, but they had been enriched and elevated by the authentic human connection that had developed between sovereign and soldiers. The guards, still maintaining their perfect military bearing, felt a sense of satisfaction and pride that went far beyond the completion of ceremonial duty. They had participated in the creation of something special, something that honored both tradition and innovation, formality and humanity. King Charles, as he prepared to complete the traditional elements of the inspection, carried with him not just the memory of an unexpected moment, but a deeper understanding of the relationship between monarch and military. The 3 cheers had given him something no amount of formal protocol could provide, the certain knowledge that he was truly accepted and genuinely appreciated by those who served under his command. The morning sun, now high overhead, seemed to bless the scene with golden light, as if nature itself was acknowledging the significance of what had just transpired in the courtyard of Windsor Castle. The ancient stones had witnessed many ceremonies over the centuries, but few as memorable or as meaningful as this spontaneous demonstration of loyalty and affection. As the ceremony moved toward its conclusion, everyone present understood that they had been part of something extraordinary. The traditional royal inspection had been transformed into something unprecedented, a moment when protocol and humanity had merged to create an experience that would be remembered and treasured for years to come. The immediate aftermath of the 3 cheers created a silence that seemed to stretch across time itself. King Charles stood before his guards, visibly moved by their unprecedented display of personal loyalty. The formal inspection was technically complete, but everyone present understood that something far more significant than protocol had been fulfilled. A new chapter in the relationship between monarch and military had been written in those few extraordinary minutes. As the king began the traditional walk back to his starting position, his steps carried a different quality than they had at the beginning of the ceremony. Where before he had moved with the measured dignity of royal protocol, now he walked with the confidence of a leader who had experienced genuine acceptance from those he commanded. The weight of the crown felt different now, not just as a symbol of authority, but as a bond of mutual respect and shared purpose. Captain Morrison, still processing what had just occurred, found himself reevaluating everything he thought he knew about royal ceremonies. In his 15 years of organizing such events, he had never witnessed anything that combined respect for tradition with such authentic human expression. His initial concern about the departure from protocol had been replaced by recognition that his soldiers had created something beautiful and meaningful. The guards themselves maintained their perfect military bearing as the king completed his inspection, but there was an unmistakable change in their demeanor. The spontaneous expression of their loyalty had created a sense of connection and pride that went beyond anything formal ceremony could achieve. They had not just participated in a royal inspection. They had helped create a moment of genuine historical significance. Sergeant Major Mitchell, whose bold decision to speak and lead the 3 cheers had initiated the transformation of the ceremony, felt the weight of what he had done settling upon him. As a career soldier, he understood the potential risks of departing from established protocol during a royal event. Yet as he watched the king's response and felt the satisfaction of his fellow guards, he knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. The foreign dignitaries present struggled to process what they had witnessed. The French ambassador, who had attended numerous formal ceremonies at Versailles and other historic venues, recognized that he had just experienced something uniquely British: the ability to honor tradition while allowing space for spontaneous human expression. The Commonwealth representatives understood even more clearly the significance of what had occurred, recognizing it as a demonstration of the personal bond that made their constitutional monarchy so distinctive and enduring. Lady Catherine Pemberton, as she watched the king complete his inspection, found herself reflecting on the evolution of royal ceremony over her long career in royal service. She had witnessed the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, observing how that monarch had balanced tradition with gradual change. Now she was seeing King Charles III establishing his own approach, one that honored the past while creating space for genuine human connection. As the formal elements of the inspection concluded, King Charles paused before returning to the castle. Protocol called for him to simply complete his ceremonial duties and depart, but the emotional resonance of the morning demanded something more. The king understood that this moment required acknowledgement, that the gift his guards had given him deserved a response that matched its significance. Turning back to face the assembled soldiers, King Charles made a decision that would be discussed and analyzed for years to come. He chose to speak again, to address directly what had just occurred, and to establish the foundation for his future relationship with the military. "Gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying a warmth that had not been present at the beginning of the ceremony. "What has happened here this morning has touched me more deeply than I can adequately express. You have shown me that duty and humanity are not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of true service." The king paused, looking along the line of soldiers who had given him such an extraordinary gift. Your 3 cheers were not in any protocol manual, not part of any established tradition, yet they expressed something more valuable than any formal salute could convey. They told me that I am not just your king by constitutional arrangement, but by your own choice and goodwill. His words carried across the courtyard with perfect clarity, each sentence weighted with genuine emotion and sincere appreciation. I want you to know that this trust you have placed in me is not something I take lightly. The loyalty you have shown me this morning creates an obligation on my part to be worthy of it, not just today, but every day of my reign. The guards listened to their sovereign's words with the same attention they had given to their military training, but their focus now carried an emotional depth that transcended mere duty. They were hearing not just their king, but a man who had been genuinely moved by their expression of loyalty and who was committing himself to earning that loyalty through his actions as their sovereign. "I know that in the days and years ahead, I will face difficult decisions and challenging moments," King Charles continued. "When those times come, I will remember this morning. I will remember that I serve not just an abstract concept of monarchy, but real people who have chosen to place their trust in me. That knowledge will guide me and strengthen me in ways that no amount of constitutional theory ever could." The silence that greeted the king's words was profound and respectful. The guards had given him the gift of their spontaneous loyalty, and he had responded by acknowledging the weight of that gift and committing himself to proving worthy of it. The exchange created a bond that would influence the character of his entire reign. As King Charles finally turned to leave the courtyard, the guards maintained their perfect military bearing until he was completely out of sight. Only then did they allow themselves to relax slightly, to exchange glances that confirmed what each of them was feeling. They had participated in something truly special, a moment that had transformed a routine ceremony into a defining experience. In the days that followed, word of the unprecedented royal inspection spread throughout the military and beyond. The story of the king who had expected a formal salute and received instead a thunderous expression of personal loyalty captured the imagination of people across Britain and throughout the Commonwealth. It became a symbol of the new king's approach to his role, his ability to honor tradition while creating space for genuine human connection. Military historians would later analyze the ceremony as a perfect example of how traditions could evolve without losing their essential character. The formal elements of the royal inspection had been preserved and honored, but they had been enriched by the addition of authentic human emotion and connection. For the Coldstream Guards themselves, the memory of that morning became a source of pride and identity that would last throughout their service. They had not just witnessed history, they had helped create it. The 3 cheers they had given their king would be talked about in barracks and mess halls for generations, a story of how soldiers had found the perfect way to express their loyalty while maintaining their military discipline. Captain Morrison would go on to organize many more royal ceremonies throughout his career, but none would ever match the emotional impact of that autumn morning at Windsor Castle. He had learned that the most meaningful traditions were not those that remained rigidly unchanged, but those that could adapt and grow while preserving their essential spirit. King Charles III, as he continued to grow into his role as monarch, would often reflect on that morning when he needed to remember the human dimension of his constitutional position. The 3 cheers from his guards had given him something invaluable, the certain knowledge that he was accepted not just as a king by inheritance, but as a leader by choice. The legacy of that day extended far beyond the individuals who were present. It became a defining story of the new king's reign, an example of how he would approach the balance between tradition and innovation, formality and humanity. The Guards' unprecedented response had not just surprised King Charles. It had established the foundation for a relationship between monarch and military that would strengthen both institutions. Years later, when historians examined the early days of King Charles III's reign, they would identify that autumn morning at Windsor Castle as a crucial moment in establishing the character of the new monarchy. The king, who had anticipated a formal salute but received instead an expression of genuine loyalty, had learned something invaluable about leadership. That true authority comes not from protocol and position alone, but from the willing acceptance and respect of those who choose to follow. The ancient stones of Windsor Castle had witnessed many ceremonies over the centuries, but few as perfect in their combination of respect for tradition and celebration of human connection. The morning when King Charles received the most unexpected and meaningful salute of his reign would be remembered as the day a new relationship between sovereign and soldier was born, built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the understanding that duty and humanity are not opposing forces, but complementary aspects of true service to crown and country.